How are you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. We are officially in the month of August, just 1 month away from the start of the NFL season. But today, we have our first NFL game back tonight with the Chicago Bears taking on the Houston Texans. No starters playing, but it's still football. We get to see the new kickoff rule, so that should be something to at least tune into to find out how that is. But on today's show, we're going to be talking about a few different things. I got a few things planned for you guys. One of the biggest ones is Mike Tomlin recently talking about the quarterback situation, providing an update on Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Also, talking about the Arizona Cardinals and their quarterback situation with Kyler Murray. Was injured last year, now fully healthy this offseason. How is he fully being integrated into this new offense? And a question that I had for you guys, how good can Kyler Murray be? Where would he fit in this day and age's quarterback rankings, in the quarterback hierarchy in today's age when there's an excess amount of top quarterbacks? Where would Kyler Murray fit in there at his absolute best? We're going to get into that and some more topics later on in the show. But before I jump into the first topic on Mike Tomlin, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments, to use the tip and donations link, GSMCPodcast.net. By using that link, I'm able to see your question or comment, and that way get your guys' perspective on any of the topics or anything I say. And that way it makes the show a little bit more interactive. And also, it's a big help for the show and also the network. So we always greatly appreciate it whenever you guys are able to use that tip and donations link with any question or comment. Again, it's GSMCPodcast.net. Make sure to use that with anything you guys have to say. But that allows me to move now into the first segment. Like I said, Mike Tomlin and this quarterback battle that has been going on with Pittsburgh for a week now officially, that they started training camp exactly last Thursday. And the whole situation with the Steelers and this quarterback room now is that they have two very capable guys, I believe, to start and be their quarterback number one to start the regular season. But the biggest thing we've heard constantly over and over again with this quarterback battle is that Russ is in pole position. Right now, Russell Wilson has the pole position in the hierarchy of the quarterbacks. So what exactly does that mean? You can kind of get an inclination of what Mike Tomlin was trying to say by that, but he kind of cleared it up today, which made me, face the situation in a whole different way, kind of look at it from a different point of view. And I'll get to that in just a second. But in terms of this job, many figured that with Mike Tomlin saying that Russell Wilson was already going to be the guy just based on what Mike Tomlin was saying. But because he has the experience, how I figured pole position kind of meant what it means in this situation, and this is kind of foreshadowing what I'm going to talk about in just a few moments, but I feel like pole position was kind of thrown out there in a way to make sure you got Russell Wilson through the door. This is what I believe. This isn't any reports or anything like that, but just based on how everything has been played out, it seems like you put it out there to have Russell Wilson see it, to kind of have Russell Wilson believe that he at least has somewhat of an upper hand over Justin Fields, just because I think right now at this point in his career, Russell Wilson isn't in a spot where, honestly, he wants to be in a quarterback battle, neck and neck, everything is fair. I believe that Russell Wilson thinks at this point in his career, he's done enough to warrant some sort of advantage coming into training camp. And if he was going to sign with any team, he wanted to make sure, that he had a good chance of being that starter. So that way, I think Mike Tomlin throws it out there. Russell Wilson is in pole position to be that starter. You get Russell Wilson through the door. You cross that bridge. And now you face this other dilemma with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson both on the team. And it gets a little bit tricky now because, like I mentioned, the Steelers have been in training camp for exactly a week now. And with Russell Wilson being in pole position, that's great for him. But he hasn't participated really at all at training camp so far. It's all been about Justin Fields getting additional reps with the first team. Russell Wilson is sidelined with a calf strain. That was at the start of it. He's kind of been eased back into it over the last few practices, but not fully back yet, and that has allowed, I think, Justin Fields and the entire national media now to kind of get a better look at Justin Fields. You see all the highlights. You see right away, I think it was right after the first day of training camp, how all the headlines read that Justin Fields is, surprising everybody. He's playing great already. Is Russell Wilson's job already in question? All these things right out the gate. That's great for Justin Fields because he's definitely taking advantage of it. He definitely wants to be the starter. Obviously, he's not going to just move to the side for Russell Wilson, but with that now, impressing, getting the additional reps, and just from what I've been, looking into it and what I've seen from training camp, the main takeaways from Justin Fields and where he's really excelling at has been a great deep ball. The ball placement also has been very good. The running ability obviously is a big one with the kind of offense that they run with Arthur Smith, and the athleticism, just overall a pure athlete, one of the best athletes already on the team, is really showing up for Justin Fields, and that's getting a lot of people excited because honestly you haven't really seen a quarterback with the Pittsburgh Steelers have that sort of repertoire, so that's exciting. And he's playing good as a traditional quarterback. He's, I think, surprising a lot of people from what they expected to see out of Justin Fields. And Mike Tomlin spoke about it in one quote that he said with CBS. I'll pull it up right now. He said, "We've got two really capable guys. We're going to create an environment where they get an opportunity to compete and see what they're capable of. Justin has really taken advantage of the opportunity for additional snaps because Russ has been out some the first week. Really just excited about the trajectory of it." What you'd expect to hear from Mike Tomlin. Again, still stressing the idea of competition up until this point where Russ hasn't been out there, so it's not like he doesn't want to seem like he's just giving the position still to Russell Wilson because it's hard to do that with Justin Fields impressing already so early on in training camp. But the more interesting quote I pulled from this interview that he did with CBS was this next quote on the pole position. Mike Tomlin himself clearing up what he meant by that and where we can now bring that in our evaluation of this quarterback competition in reality, when he said, "We described it as Russ having pole position, meaning that they're going to be given an opportunity to compete, but I just think it's important to lean on his experience and his expertise relative to the things that come outside of playing to provide direction for the unit." And I think that was really telling and also really fascinating. To kind of go back to what I mentioned before, pole position, you throw it out there to make sure Russ comes in, make sure you sign him, make sure he wants to sign with the Steelers, thinking that he'll have a great opportunity to be the starter once he signs. But basically, I think this is still saying that, yes, it is going to be a competition, but Russ should be in that, pole position so that the team kind of right off the bat sees him in a position of, leadership, takes him seriously, because after the Denver Broncos situation, it's very easy for Russ to walk in the locker room and not be taken seriously, not be taken as a full, leader, even though he's had a great career, great legacy already with Seattle and everything he did there. After the most recent run of events, it could be a situation where some guys just look at this guy funny and think that, this is the guy that had that cheesy pickup line in Denver and they didn't succeed at all. So I think that pole position sort of statement kind of helped Russ get in, have all these guys really rally around him and still make him believe, take him seriously, and sort of remind everybody by signing him that this is still the same old Russell Wilson. Let's not forget that this is a guy that has won a Super Bowl, was super successful, one of the best quarterbacks at the time with Seattle. I think that more so was the idea of Mike Tomlin saying that Russ is in pole position right now to make sure he is in this leadership position right away where guys look at him whenever he's talking, they make sure they listen and get him to take him seriously most of all. Not so much as giving him advantage right away, handing him over the keys, but making sure everybody in that locker room knows that, this is still Russell Wilson. Whatever happened recently in Denver is one situation. He also had an enormous amount of success in Seattle. So that's where I'm thinking about it. And does that mean in any way that this quarterback battle is now 50-50? Probably not up until that extent, but I think Justin Fields is definitely getting people to look at this team differently. And then the last thing I'll say about this is now with Justin Fields improving and impressing people, now you get this conversation in the national media of if Justin Fields plays, I've heard that people are comparing this Steelers team, the potential of this team to that of the Baltimore Ravens with having that running ability, that great running game with Najee and Jaylen Warren, and Justin Fields, who is, I think, a very talented runner, maybe not as talented as Lamar, but he's right there in terms of athletic ability. This team sort of resembles that with the heavy packages, the 12 personnel, the multiple tight end looks. The only difference now with the Steelers team is that they have a great generational type of receiver like George Pickens, where the Baltimore Ravens don't really have that. So in a way, if you really want to go into this comparison and think that, the quarterbacks line up with their abilities, you have the great offensive line or the offensive line that the Steelers are building, a great running duo, you could say that maybe in that scenario, the Steelers could have a better situation now because they have better receivers than the Baltimore Ravens do at this point in time. So I'm not saying I fully buy into that, but I wanted to address it because I've heard it and I kind of see it. But right now, I'd like to see the Steelers step foot on the field during the regular season before I start crowning them the next Baltimore Ravens. There are some resemblances. I do acknowledge that fact, but we are still just getting into August. We are in the first day of August, and right now, it could still be Russell Wilson starting, and I think that's still the majority feeling up until this point. But Justin Fields is certainly, impressing a lot of people and surprising a lot of people is what I meant to say, because I don't think a lot of people expected him to right away show off some of that ball placement, some of that deep ball placement, and surprising a lot of people early on. The offense is looking good from what I've been able to follow up on Twitter through training camp and all of that. So it's exciting. It's exciting when you're getting compared to one of the best teams in the AFC. But again, I'm a guy that likes to see it. I have to see it first before I make any sort of projection somewhat. Let's just get to preseason at least first. But that is everything on Mike Tomlin, providing an update on the quarterback battle a week into training camp. And with that being said, we're going to jump from one quarterback situation to another with the Arizona Cardinals. Now with Kyler Murray being fully integrated into this offense, having a full offseason to really learn this offense, where is Kyler Murray's ceiling? With all these great, phenomenal quarterbacks in the league right now, I wanted to evaluate where does Kyler Murray fit into that, because he's coming off of a hurt season. I like where the Cardinals are going, but with this pairing, where could that elevate Kyler Murray in terms of fitting into this tier hierarchy ranking for the quarterbacks nowadays? We're going to answer that question and dive deeper into that when we return. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Jumping right back into the show and bringing up a topic that might be one of the least talked about topics I've brought up on this show, the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, just because we're talking about the Arizona Cardinals, and overall, honestly, they haven't had much going for themselves. There's bad teams, there's teams that you don't think really have a chance to be contenders. They're just in a weird spot where they could be competitive. They're going to be maybe around 500, but that's one situation. But even worse than that are, the irrelevant teams, the forgotten teams where right off the bat, right through the start of the regular season, right through the end, you never really have a hope that they're going to be anywhere near thinking that they're a capable, good team. And that's the scary part when you're thinking about an organization like the Arizona Cardinals that have been in a bad part, in just a bad stretch over the last few years. But it is weird because with Arizona, they have some solid players, especially now with bringing in Marvin Harrison Jr. James Conner just came off the best year of his career. And then you get to Kyler Murray, right? The best position, or the most important position, I should say, on an NFL roster. And now Kyler Murray is 5 years into his NFL career. And in my opinion, really from what I've seen from him, he has, I think, that special ability that just draws people in, that draws a crowd, that draws excitement in for an organization. He has that, it factor, you could say, in other terms. And although the team as a whole has to improve definitely after last year, disappointing again and having a high draft pick once again, I thought that overall, from what that team was at the beginning of the year and the offseason last year, I thought they made some pretty decent strides overall with Jonathan Gannon, their new head coach, coming in there in his first year last year. He had some pretty impressive performances. Just one that I remember against the Steelers, beating the Steelers in Pittsburgh. I'm pretty sure they beat the Dallas Cowboys as well. That was only in his first year, and dealing with all the, maybe not the best level of talent or just trying to figure everything out on the fly. I thought he did an okay job given all the circumstances and that. And now he did all of that without having, his starting quarterback, because Kyler Murray tore his ACL and they didn't have him for the majority of the season up until the last, up until the last, 6 games or something like that. So that's a huge, already that's a huge liability, not having the corner piece, the main thing that drives your whole offense not there, and you still put in some decent performances. I thought they did all right under Jonathan Gannon, and now it's significant too because they brought in a new offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, and not having that offseason to integrate his offense with the actual starting quarterback, you don't really know what this offense honestly could really be. You have an idea based on what they showed, based on players stepping up like Trey McBride, and like I mentioned, James Conner. Those are promising signs, but there's always that next level you can reach because Kyler Murray wasn't there. And now there are reports coming out from Sports Illustrated and how this sort of partnership, this new relationship has been, working out so far for the Cardinals, for Drew Petzing, for Kyler Murray. And according to Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, Kyler has already been impressing a lot of people within the organization, including Petzing and all of the coaching staff and organizational members already. And Albert Breer even said that there's an excitement about Kyler Murray heading into 2024, going on also to say whether perception matched reality or not, the noise around Murray before Gannon and his staff arrived here 18 months ago wasn't good, and there's a reason you haven't heard much of that since. And that's really the biggest thing with Kyler Murray, right? I don't think it's so much the talent ability or the talent aspect of it, his skill set or anything like that. Maybe you want to point out his height. He's not the biggest guy out there. That's just a fact. You can't change that. But the biggest thing I think really developing with Kyler Murray over the last few years has been just the negative aspect of it. His character being brought into question, his attitude, his ability as a leader. Is that something the Cardinals, can carry into the next 4 or 5 years, because they did extend him to that 5-year, $230.5 million extension last offseason or a couple off seasons ago. It, puts into question now, did the Cardinals make a mistake doing that with the character questions, the leadership aspect of it not being the most positive around Kyler during that time? You go back to that knee injury he suffered in December of 2022. He got the extension in that year, the summer of 2022, and of course the worst scenario happens. He gets injured, and right away, the negatives start flowing in around Kyler Murray. And after the injury, an anonymous Arizona player was quoted by saying that they created a monster, referring to Murray and signing him to this huge deal. And now that he's gotten this huge deal, basically the quote kind of envisions Kyler Murray becoming, this careless, not really the kind of character, the kind of person that you want being a leader. And that's where all this stems from, right? The attitude questions, the lack of accountability. Is he a hard worker? All that stuff like that. People bring in, his personal life with how he plays video games a lot. He's really involved in that aspect of, gaming, of doing something else outside of football. And people start to question, is his focus really on football, or is he just thinking about playing Call of Duty all day or something like that, where it's a little unfair, but that's what happens almost when a player gets injured, and he can't have the ability to go out there and prove that, hey, I'm still fully focused, I'm still a good player in the NFL. And to go off of those negative comments, the negative narrative that has, followed Kyler recently, there was that time before last season, it was reported that some head coaching candidates before Jonathan Gannon was eventually hired, that they didn't want this job because they'd be tied to the hip of Kyler Murray for the next 4 years. After he got that extension, it was reported that a lot of head coaches, just didn't want to be involved in that situation, didn't want to form a partnership or a relationship with Kyler Murray because of all these negative stories coming out about him. And again, that's what has been happening. That's what has been the whole storyline so far for Kyler Murray. And so far, according to Albert Breer, it's been really the opposite of that so far. Breer also adds on that in this full offseason with Jonathan Gannon and Petzing, Murray's been a model teammate. In the words of Albert Breer, he's been full steam ahead in this second year of Petzing's offense, trying to catch up, get everything, under control, and really learning this offense, being uber productive and trying to really know this like the back of his hand, because this is a big season now for the Arizona Cardinals. Because before, like I mentioned, last year they were all right considering all the circumstances, but now you have your starting quarterback now back in for hopefully an entire year. You hope to look a lot better now with Kyler Murray in as the starter, trying to learn this offense as quickly as possible with some of those weapons like I mentioned before. I think Trey McBride was one of the shining, stars that came out of this entire situation. Just out of nowhere, you have a very reliable tight end, it seems like. James Conner, a very reliable option outside or in the backfield. Marvin Harrison, the most ready player coming out of college I think I've ever seen. And now with Murray coming back, you hope to take that next step. And even when he returned last year for the last 8 games, he had a 3-5 record, 65% completion percentage. He had 1,799 yards, 10 touchdowns and 5 interceptions with 3 rushing touchdowns and almost 300 rushing yards. So it's an all right stat line, considering everything, not really knowing the offense. Still putting up those numbers I think was at least decent to finish off the regular season. But, now we get into projecting. Now we get into the question, how good can Kyler Murray really be with a head coach that I think is the best that he's had there in his time as the Arizona Cardinals, quarterback, and really with a better team, with one of the best teams I think he's had, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive side of the ball, I'm kind of hoping that Jonathan Gannon, with his expertise on that side of the ball, can sort of mask some of the bigger deficiencies. But offensively, I just ratted off a bunch of players that they have at their disposal. And from what I've seen, Kyler at full potential was back in 2020. At least from what we've already seen, he could reach another level. But the best year we've seen from Kyler Murray, in my opinion, was in 2020, in his second year, where his stat line was almost 4,000 yards. He was 29 yards short of reaching 4,000. Then he had 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 67% completion percentage, and he had 819 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns in that year. And I might get some sticks for this. I might, you guys might obliterate me by mentioning this, but those numbers are very similar to Lamar Jackson's numbers this year, and he won the MVP this past year. So I'm not saying he's Lamar or he could be that level of what Lamar is, the kind of player that he is. Obviously, he's won 2 MVPs already, so to compare Kyler Murray to him is insane. But the numbers, are there. You can read them. You can compare them to Lamar's numbers this year. Back in 2020, the best year that Kyler has had. is the numbers that Lamar put up this past season, and he won the MVP. So in comparison to all the other numbers compared to other quarterbacks this year, the yards were top 10 in terms of, how many yards he passed for in 2020. Then also, he was around 9 or 10 in terms of passing touchdowns. Rushing touchdowns, he would have been first or second in the NFL among quarterbacks, only behind or just barely in front of Lamar Jackson. So, yes, overall, painting the entire picture of who Kyler Murray is, I think the stats kind of show you the ability, and just watching it on TV as well, the eye test, you can see that he's an absolute nightmare to try and tackle. The arm talent is certainly there with his baseball background. I think he has the ability to maneuver his throw, angle his arm in different ways where he can make some pretty impressive throws. He's got a pretty strong arm as well. And now with the experience, you put that all together with the production that he has put up already in the NFL, it makes me think of Kyler, maybe he has an opportunity here now with, like I said, the best team he's had, the best head coach that he's had, to kind of get back to that level, and then trying to compare him to other quarterbacks and seeing where he fits in. To me, I think at full strength, fully healthy, with a better team, I think Kyler is right almost in that second tier of quarterbacks. At his absolute best, I think he can be right in there with the Justin Herberts, with the Trevor Lawrences, with the Baker Mayfields, Jalen Hurts, perhaps. He's made a Super Bowl, so that one's a little bit debatable. Kirk Cousins, even. I think at his absolute best, like I'm saying, hopefully he gets back to that. Maybe he even exceeds it this year, but I think he could be merged into that conversation with some of those guys. Definitely not the Josh Allens, the Patricks, obviously, the CJ Strouds, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott even. I don't think he's there yet. Maybe he could reach that level, but for right now, I think he's at his absolute best could be in that second group of guys where, they have all the talent in the world, but the team production hasn't really been there. And I think Kyler, based on what I've seen, based on what I've, researched about him in terms of production, I think he fully should be in that group. And I don't think that's too crazy to say, because all these guys sort of have the similar story. Very good. Baker revitalized his career just coming off of his best year. Jalen Hurts has had 1 to 2 great years, but has also had some pretty shaky years. Trevor Lawrence still trying to get over that hump. Has had great moments, but also some very poor moments as well. As a team, also has made the playoffs one time, has won a game. Kyler has made the playoffs one time. And Justin Herbert as well made the playoffs one time, but he's full of all this talent. All these guys are like, you're waiting to see that next step, and I think Kyler could fit in there pretty nicely. I don't think that's too out of pocket to say, as much of a hot topic or a hot take, I should say. But that's how I'm feeling about Kyler. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe the Cardinals are not going to be anything too special, I presume, with the division that they're in. But this is a building thing. And I think Kyler could be merged into that group going forward. But let me know what you guys think of what I say, and where do you guys have Kyler Murray ranking among some of the top quarterbacks in today's game. But we'll leave it at that. We'll end that discussion there. We're going to move on with some new topics that I didn't mention before. The Kansas City Chiefs appearing to backtrack on their unique kicking strategy that I thought they were going to be implementing, but it looks like they will not be going that route in 2024. And also some training camp news around the Philadelphia Eagles, some battles, some positional standings in terms of offensive line, how everything is sort of getting gelled together. We'll go over that when we come back right after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping right back into the action, talking about the new kickoff rule, the new kickoff format now that is set to debut, currently live. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The game is about to kick off in about an hour from now, so it revolves around that, the new kickoff format, the new kickoff rules that we're going to be seeing hopefully tonight. Hopefully some excitement out of that between the Bears and the Texans. But this has to do with the Kansas City Chiefs. And about 2 months ago, the Chiefs suggested that their safety, Justin Reid, would be taking some of the kickoffs in this new format with the new rules, making it more likely for the kickers to, have to tackle, because just off the top of my head, if I'm stating the rules right, the kicking team, the defending team is not allowed to move until the receiving team fields the ball, they make contact with the ball, and then, the entire play gets going. And that allows more of an advantage for the offense, setting up their blocks and everything like that. The NFL wanting to see more kickoffs in 2024, and it could lead to some kickers having, to throw their body weight around, throwing themselves in there, maybe making a last-ditch tackle to save a touchdown or something like that. Honestly, you ideally might not want to have Harrison Butker out there, because in terms of tackling, not his forte, let's say. Not any kicker's forte in that matter. So to avoid injury perhaps to Harrison Butker, you have Justin Reid out there, obviously for the tackling aspect of it, but also to avoid injury to Butker. And Justin Reid has, the experience of doing it. We saw him last year where Harrison Butker was injured for a stretch of games, or maybe just one game, but Justin Reid came in there, hit a couple field goals, obviously did the kickoffs in that game. So it was exciting. I like the idea of teams thinking outside the box with this. A new format, gets people thinking in creative ways. I would have loved to have seen Justin Reid out there, giving him an opportunity to do that and see how it all plays out. But now, over the weekend, the Kansas City Chiefs special teams coach, Dave Taub, said that Butker will be doing most of the kickoffs, if not all of them, because of his kicking accuracy, obviously, and his ability to place the ball anywhere in the landing zone away from the receivers, ideally, and maybe having it just roll into the end zone, or having it, be avoided that they take the ball out or return it by any means. So that's really the biggest idea about it. I was disappointed by it, but Taub went on to say that you have to try and kick it away from the returners if you can. Hit it in the target zone and skip it into the end zone, possibly for a touchback, where the opponent gets the ball at the 20-yard line. That's the ultimate goal on kickoffs, and that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but it's the boring way to go. I didn't really like it. I thought, give an opportunity to Justin Reid. He wasn't that bad, and, I wanted to see him do it. I wanted to see how the receiving team now, reacts to that. You don't have a typical kicker out there, so how does that affect the return game? How does that affect you setting up your blocks and everything like that? So, disappointed, yeah, but I kind of understand it, with going over some of the rules. If the ball is kicked directly into the end zone on the fly and not returned, like, the fear is with Justin Reid, if he just goes out there and boots it, because he doesn't have maybe too much experience placing the ball in the landing zone. I don't think anybody does if you're not a kicker, but if you just kick it directly into the end zone or just outside through the back of the end zone for a touchback, the ball goes directly to the 30-yard line. So that's really the biggest thing about this, right? You don't want to be giving the opposing team better field, position right away just because you kick it out through the end zone or kick it directly into the end zone for a touchback. And again, if you're not a kicker, I would say that's almost impossible to, one, land it perfectly in the landing zone, and also keep it away from the receivers, and also have it roll into the end zone ideally. And again, if you're not a kicker, it's almost impossible to do all three, and oftentimes it could lead to a botched kick. Maybe they kick it too hard and then they start at the 30-yard line. Teams want to avoid that at all costs, and that's really the biggest thing, obviously, with this. But also, if it, the the 20-yard line scenario, if it rolls into the end zone and, the team decides to not return it, then it starts at the 20-yard line. And I think Harrison Butker, obviously with who he is, the experience, and his ability overall, gives you the best chance of doing that. But realistically, teams could, I guess, kick it through the end zone and be okay with giving up that extra field position if they decided to avoid their kickers being involved. If they really didn't want, a Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker, Jake Elliott perhaps being involved in tackling, then yeah, you could say, we're just going to kick it through, take the touchback, take the ball at the 30. Our defense is good enough, to withstand that. That could be a strategy, taking some good with the bad, balancing out the risk versus reward in that scenario. But I think the Chiefs right now feel comfortable doing that. You know what's funny? I think it's a little surprising, I'll say, when I hear teams, be pretty confident about their kickers being able to make a tackle. And of course they're your teammates. Of course you don't want to say, oh, they have no chance. But I don't know, if we're being honest, a kicker trying to make a last-ditch tackle or trying to make a tackle on somebody in today's NFL with some of the receivers that you have, some of the players that are being deployed in the kickoff return game, like I talked about Debo. The Steelers also have Cordell Patterson that they signed in that aspect. Some guys that are just blazing fast in that aspect as well. I would have just liked to have seen some more realistic reactions, I think, to some kickers, some teammates talking about their kickers making some tackles. I felt that it could have been a more cautious approach, a more cautious, reaction to having your kickers out there, not this exuberance of confidence that, oh yeah, my kicker's going to make that tackle. Of course he could do that. And maybe they'll do it a couple times, but repeatedly isn't something that I think is realistic. And right now, it's disappointing that the Chiefs sort of backtracked on this, but I'm not giving up hope. I think it'll all depend on how it goes throughout the season. Harrison Butker has gotten hurt already. You don't think or hope that that's going to happen again, but it has already happened. So Justin Reed could get an opportunity that way, and I think it just all depends on the situation, the circumstance of it all, and how it all plays out. But I think this is but I don't like them, just kicking it out the back of the end zone either. If they do decide to go with Justin Reed, if they decide that he's not really capable of doing all three things, kicking it into the landing zone, keeping it as far away as the receivers as possible, and also having it roll, get the appropriate spin on it with an awkward shaped ball to roll into the end zone and not out of bounds per se. That wrapped up into one is a more of a risk, I believe, for the Chiefs to do it. So you got to weigh it out. Right now, the Chiefs have switched over to the other side, so maybe after a few preseason games, they'll change their mind again. But a little disappointed. The risk of Butker also tackling could still be there, so I think they're still considerate with Justin Reed, just depending on the circumstances of it all. But we'll see how it all plays out. It's super neat to think about now how I have an entire segment devoted to the kickoff game, because I truly believe that it's going to be something that is tinkered with, changing constantly from game to game, from week to week, and you're going to see some teams have a brilliant strategy to it, a bunch of other teams copying it, then maybe something completely doesn't work and you have to go through all these different scenarios of what could work, what is working for other teams, and things like that. It's going to be funny and very entertaining to see how teams react to it and how everybody, plays off of it, because this is truly something so new to be, brought into football that it's going to make everything more exciting. We'll see how it plays out for the Chiefs taking this decision now, but that'll be pretty much everything on that situation. The Chiefs going back on their decision to have Justin Reed do some of the kickoffs in 2024. But with that being said, like I mentioned before, we're going to move into the next segment talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, some of the takeaways from the early portion of their training camp, talking about A.J. Brown going up against their rookie first-round draft pick in Quinyon Mitchell, some exciting battles there. Also, Mekhi Becton, who they signed in free agency, he's having some looks at right guard instead of tackle, which has panned out pretty well for him so far. And lastly, Cam Jurgens transitioning back to center to inherit that position from the legendary Jason Kelsey. How is that all panning out for the Philadelphia Eagles thus far? I'll give you guys all those details when we return after this break. Don't go anywhere.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here on the show, now diving into some more training camp topics, ones that I think I've seen more of than any other ones, just in terms of what's going on there, not having to do with injuries or anything like that, or holdouts. I think that's been really dominating the landscape of training camp thus far, but this is one where the on-the-field storylines and how everything pans out has really, stuck out thus far. And I wanted to bring it up because the Eagles are one of the teams, I believe, that have a lot riding on their shoulders, and they should be because of the talent they have on this team, the disappointing season that they had in 2023, and they have a lot of intriguing scenarios that, not a lot of people think of when it comes to these stacked teams. On paper, you find it hard to find any weaknesses, but there are certain positions and certain decisions that they're going to have to make that could impact a lot of how this team looks and how this team performs week in and week out. And one of those is the secondary, and thus far, they're going to most likely have a young secondary or a younger secondary based on, the players that are coming in now and transitioning away, like I talked about last episode, away from James Bradbury, because I find it hard to believe that you could just throw him back out there and be confident that there's going to be a drastic change. That's why they went out and drafted Cooper DeJean. They're bringing back Isaiah Rodgers. They still have Kelly Ringo, who they drafted last year also. Quinyon Mitchell, obviously drafted in the first round. All this young talent at that position is exciting. It's something that you hope to get more production out of, and I think it's going to be led most likely by Quinyon Mitchell, their first draft pick in this year's draft. And right away, the Eagles haven't been shy about, throwing him to the wolves, essentially, and having him be matched up with A.J. Brown. Iron sharpens iron. That's something you always hear. And I think this is going to be great for Quinyon Mitchell for his development, facing off against one of the best receivers in the NFL through training camp is definitely something intriguing to keep note of, and something that I'm sure draws a lot of eyes just to see how Quinyon Mitchell has been performing. And thus far, based on what I've been reading and just seeing all over social media, he's definitely, been impressing against A.J. Brown in a lot of coverages and a lot of scenarios. The most recent one that I saw was that I think after their fifth practice a few days ago, where A.J. Brown got the better of Quinyon Mitchell during their team setting, 11v11s or 7-on-7s. A.J. Brown had some success there, but when it came down to the one-on-ones, that's where, you get your popcorn ready, you sit on the sidelines and see, when there's no help, when there's no zone coverage or anything like that, it's just you staring at your opponent. Quinyon Mitchell, the rookie, actually did very well, and he stood up to the challenge because they ran 2 reps with Mitchell against A.J. Brown, and during the first rep, Jalen Hurts didn't even get a throwaway because of the great coverage that Quinyon Mitchell had. Then they ran it back. They had to have run it back if Jalen Hurts didn't even throw it. During the second rep, right after that, A.J. Brown did make a very impressive catch, but Quinyon Mitchell was very clever and wise enough to throw him out of the back of the end zone, not let him get 2 feet down, and that rep also went to Quinyon Mitchell. So he went 2-0 against A.J. Brown in the one-on-one settings, which, again, is maybe not too much, but also I like to read into that sort of stuff, I think more so than some people do, just because it might be, the case of, it's only July, it's still essentially practice. But those moments, I think, are just little building blocks, little, injections of confidence for a guy like Quinyon Mitchell, who has, you could say, some pressure, being the first draft pick for the Eagles this year, to go out there and sort of prove himself that he could stand up to A.J. Brown, knowing that who A.J. Brown is. I think that's going to only benefit him to build this, foundation for himself to be that player that they envision him in being in 2024. And on the topic on just overall how training camp has been going, Mitchell said that they can put me out there at nickel or dime. I'm just ready for it. They've been throwing it at me, but I feel like I've been handling the ropes so far. And that is true. Also, Philadelphia has been, moving Mitchell all over the secondary, experimenting as you would at this point in the offseason in training camp, which I think is great. More exposure for Quinyon, not just on the outside, but really seeing where his limitations are everywhere across that secondary and seeing where he fits in best compared to other players that also need to fill out the rest of the spots. So far so good for Quinyon Mitchell. He is definitely one of the players that I had high hopes for heading into this year. When the draft happened, I was, completely surprised that he fell into the 20s, but the Eagles have a heck of a player here, I believe. Opposite of Darius Slay, learning from Darius Slay as well in some of these matchups, in some of these scenarios, I think it's going to be great for him and the Eagles. But there's also the topic on offensive line here, and they kind of play off of each other that I wanted to bring up here, these two topics, just overall on the offensive line. Starting with Mekhi Becton, with Jason Kelce obviously retiring. Last year you had an actual center in Cam Jurgens, who you drafted, playing right guard, and that's not naturally his position. So with Jason Kelce retiring, he now moves back to starting center, and you're gonna have to get the chemistry going there with Jalen Hurts and the handoffs and everything like that. But from that aspect, that's not what I wanted to touch on right now. I'll save that for a little bit later, but that allows, that right guard position to be open now. And Mekhi Becton, the former highly drafted New York Jet, drafted to be a tackle, has been a surprising candidate to be one of the, main guys to take up that right guard position and be maybe a starter when the season comes in about a month now in 2024. What's funny about it is, that scenario in and of itself, Mekhi Becton was a high draft pick. He was drafted to be one of the starting tackles for the New York Jets, but obviously that didn't work out. And because it didn't work out, now he hits free agency. He signs with the Philadelphia Eagles, sort of as a compliment to Jordan Mailata or Lane Johnson, you would think, to eventually maybe take over one of their spots, maybe Lane eventually. But with, what's been going through the offensive line, how they're experimenting up until this point with seeing who's going to be the right guard, how's Cam Jurgens looking at center, Mekhi Becton has been learning the guard position over the last 3 months, and so far so good for Mekhi Becton. It has been reported that he has been surprising a lot of people. He's been running with the first-team offense at right guard, so it's panning out to be a good picture, especially because Tyler Steen, who was the projected starter at right guard right now for the Philadelphia Eagles, he is injured right now, so it gives more of a chance for Mekhi Becton to go out there and prove himself. And like I said, he's been impressing in a lot of drills, impressing during the team period, during the 11-on-11 drills, especially against Jalen Carter. Right away, arguably the Eagles' best defensive lineman already just in his second year. He's had some battles with Mekhi Becton, and Mekhi Becton has stood up to him in some of those drills, so it's going to be huge how this entire offensive line looks eventually when we start the season. But having Mekhi Becton in there as a candidate to be almost out of position and have a starting spot on this Eagles offensive line, I think was pretty surprising and something that you don't see typically happen for some of these offensive linemen playing out of position, making a change like this. I think it's great for Mekhi getting this new opportunity for the Eagles, and then hopefully he gets the starting right guard spot because he's huge. He's a mountain of a man. So it'd be great for the Eagles line too as well to have him in there, but we'll see. I'm sure the best guy will get the spot eventually, but for the last part of it, I wanted to mention Cam Jurgens. Like I said, moving back to the center position, how he's transitioning back to that, and he's obviously painted to be the starter already, so how does he deal with the responsibility of that. Obviously, you're learning from Jason Kelsey, one of the best to ever do it at the center position, but he has been playing right guard, so how does he knock off some of the rust? The transition, the handoff to Jalen Hurts is going to be as important as anything, making sure they get a good relationship and a good exchange doing that. But, this is the third year now for Cam Jurgens, so, he does still have some learning to do, now moving back to his original position, and we'll see how everything else goes, because this offensive line is pretty much set everywhere except those two spots. You have Landon Dickerson there at left guard, Mailata left tackle, Lane Johnson right tackle. These two spots there in the middle are going to be as important as anything, and it seems like the right guard spot is going to be between Mekhi Becton and Tyler Steen, maybe when he comes back from injury. So the center position, yeah, you have Cam Jurgens there, but how does he look running with the first team in a different position? What's the dynamic of it? He's going to have to call out coverages or some of these things, shift the protection at times as well. Is he ready for that, and will he be able to do that right away at an efficient level? It's one of those positions where if you're doing a great job, no one's really talking about you, which is kind of odd. If you're doing a phenomenal job, you're protecting the quarterback, nobody is really overly praising you. But if you're doing an awful job, it's in some way, shape, or form, it's even louder than some of the other positions that get criticized, because you can't block anybody. It's pretty evident and pretty obvious that you're getting just manhandled in there. So it does come with a lot, but the Eagles feel confident that Cam Jurgens is up for that challenge with already, like I said, heading into his third year in the NFL. We'll see how that all plays out, but those are really the biggest takeaways so far through Eagles training camp up until this point, and that almost does it for this show. We have one more topic to get to on today's episode, talking about the NFL Top 100, going through another section of the player rankings, this time 30 through 21, before tomorrow I get to the final segment of the top 10 and also the 11 through 20 in tomorrow's episode. But before that, we got to talk about who made the list 30 through 21. That is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's episode. Again, talking about my reactions, my analysis of the NFL Network's top 100 player rankings, this time going through 30 through 21, because like I mentioned on yesterday's show, the beginning, top 50, even top 40 players, you could almost rank them anywhere, and I don't think anybody would really have a big problem with it, really up until that point. It really gets now to the top 30, top 20, and then obviously the top 10, where some of the rankings can create more of a discrepancy in some of the opinions and analysis you get. So I thought I'd bring that up again here today. And going through some of those rankings, I'll show you guys how they panned out thus far, starting with 30, going through 26, and then I'll obviously show you guys the rest of the list. We have Deebo Samuel, then Khalil Mack, Brock Purdy, Nick Bosa at 27. 26 is Mike Evans. Then the other half of that list, before I go into, talking about it, we have Jalen Ramsey at 25, Dexter Lawrence in at 24. At 23, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. 22, we have his teammate Penei Sewell. And A.J. Brown rounds off this group of players at 21. And my initial thoughts on this, were a little surprising just on some other rankings of this group. This group, you look at it, the name that jumps off right away is Brock Purdy. Even though he's coming off of a phenomenal year, this is his first career appearance on the list, and to debut at 28 is pretty impressive, and, he had a great year. It's the first time a 49er quarterback made the list since Jimmy Garoppolo, and this year he finished number 4 in MVP votings as well, and he also, has the 49er franchise record in passing yards this year with 4,280, led the NFL in QBR, also in QB rating, and it's just overall a significant spot for Brock Purdy, but with all the stats that I just read out, he pretty much backed it all up, and maybe it rubs people the wrong way just because he is higher than Tua, than Jordan Love, than Joe Burrow, but all those other guys, had something about them. The team performance wasn't that great. Joe Burrow was injured. The only one I guess you could make an argument for was Jordan Love, but Brock Purdy and the 49ers beat the Packers, so I think Brock has earned himself a high rating. I don't know if I would have given him 28 right off the bat, but that was something that jumped out at me right away. Then you look at the other half of it, or actually I'll stick here before I jump into that. Nick Bosa, you look at, and how he is the 27th ranked player, is actually the lowest he's ever been ranked on this list. He made the list the last 3 straight years, and for this to be the lowest he's ever been ranked is pretty insane, considering he's made the list the last 3 consecutive years. But it almost feels too low. I feel like from watching Nick Bosa, what he has already proven in his not long NFL career, I think he at least has warranted a top 20. I think 27 is a little too low for my liking, and just how much the 49ers depend on him, especially on that defensive line, especially going into this year. I think 27 is a little too low for me, but I can kind of understand it from that point of view. Mike Evans at 26, considered arguably one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated receiver in the NFL. And this is where I think this is one of the most accurate rankings I've seen of Mike Evans in recent years. I think with what he brings to the Buccaneers, how great he is. I forget how many 1,000-yard receiving seasons he has now. It might be like in the double digits now, honestly, or close to that, with just how quietly he's building this Hall of Fame resume. And a lot of times he doesn't get brought up in the top wide receiver conversations, but at 26, you can make a case for him for the lower 20s, or the higher 20s, I should say, maybe to fit in somewhere there. But I like where he is at this point. I'm content with that for this half of the list. But then you move into the other half, and there are some more takeaways I had from here. Jalen Ramsey at 25, he was pretty highly ranked on the cornerback rankings for ESPN. He was around 5, I want to say. So a little surprising, but also I think still he is Jalen Ramsey. He still has that, reputation of being one of the best corners in the game. 25 is all right. It's not something I'll, make a fuss out of it too much. The biggest ones were really Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell. Amon-Ra St. Brown jumps up 43 spots to be at number 23 from last year's list. He made the All-Pro first team this past year with about 1,500 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns, so very much well-deserved. Amon-Ra really now starting to really make a push for those names that you bring up right away, with the Justin Jeffersons, with the Jamar Chase, the CeeDee Lambs, Devontae Adams as well you can throw in there, the Tyreek Hills. There's so many, but Amon-Ra, I think after the year that he just had, is slowly climbing, and I don't think he's reached his ceiling at all. I think he could definitely improve in certain areas, as well as this entire Lions team. They're coming off one of the best years that they've had in their recent entire history, and now that they have not one superstar, but this other superstar that I want to talk about, Penei Sewell, the NFL and just the players in general giving love to one of the best tackles and just overall offensive linemen that the NFL has to offer. This is also Penei Sewell. The first time he has made this list, he's one spot ahead of his teammates, so I'm sure they're going to have some good banter around that. But he also made the All-Pro team, became the highest paid tackle in the NFL when he received his contract, but that was just surpassed actually today by Tristan Wirfs. So very much regarded as one of the best offensive linemen. I think himself, Tristan Wirfs, and Trent Williams are probably the three best if I were to guess and just name them off the top of my head. Penei Sewell really just becoming one of the cornerstone pieces of this Detroit Lions team. I think he really sets the attitude and just the production as well in how well the Detroit Lions not only pass protect and how Jared Goff has all that success, but also in the running game. They're almost unstoppable when they establish the running game, and then Jared Goff is stepping back there, running through play actions, and then you get Amon-Ra going. Sam Laporta is another one that had a very impressive year. This Detroit Lions team, based on these two guys and how their top 25 players already, both of them super young still, have had great years. They got rewarded for it with both of them getting long-term extensions, and now you expect this to keep going, to live up to that contract, and I'm very confident in both of them that they're going to be able to do that. And then just going over A.J. Brown here to round it off, he actually jumped up one spot, I believe, from last year where he was ranked 22. Now he's at 21 this year, and, he had a pretty impressive year overall. To jump one spot, it might not seem like a lot, but he had a very historic, short run of it here in 2023 where he had 6 weeks. He had a 6-week span where he recorded at least 120 receiving yards in each game that he had in that span. So that was phenomenal. Just another reason why A.J. Brown, just during that period, looked like the best receiver in the NFL by far. But it was unfortunate that the Eagles sort of fell off there at the end. He failed to really get involved from that point on, and that was a shame. But I think he's very, very fairly ranked at 21 because he's paid like one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL, and you can't honestly name too many guys that you would take over A.J. Brown at this point in time. But those are the notes that I had on the guys that are ranked 30 through 21. The list of 20 through 11 actually came out today, and I'm going to go over it tomorrow and sort of give my predictions of the top 10 because of the weird timing of it all. The top 10 is actually going to be released tomorrow at 8 p.m. And obviously this show is going to be done by that time. So I'm going to react to 20 through 11 tomorrow and also give my predictions of what I think the top 10 is going to be and what I believe it should be, because some of the players that have already been released answered some of my questions about the next group that followed this one. Dak was ranked, Fred Warner was ranked. I didn't see Jahmyr Gibbs or Breece Hall, and I was curious to see if some of these players were going to be bold enough to throw in one of these young running backs that high, but it doesn't look like they're going to be included in the list that high. Unless I missed them from the previous rankings, it doesn't look like they're going to be at least in the top 20. There's no way they'll be in the top 10. But, what's interesting about this, none of the top 6 highest paid quarterbacks are in the top 20. And I think that says a lot, just going back to that topic that really clouds over the entire offseason. Everyone's paying the quarterback position, but in the eyes of some of their peers, all these guys that are getting these massive contracts, the top 6 highest paid quarterbacks, none of them are in the top 20. So some of the other guys, and of course it has to do just based on timing and who comes into the NFL at what time, but I think it still has some merit showing that the peers, the guys that are going against these quarterbacks, don't really rank them too much, higher than some of these other guys that some of them aren't getting paid to that extensive amount as quarterbacks are. And it all has to do, obviously, with the nature of the game. But I thought that was pretty interesting as well. So we'll see where that goes tomorrow. I'm looking forward to ranking those positions and just those players overall on tomorrow's show. But that'll do it for today's episode. Overall, I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's show. As always, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of this show, other sources of content around the NFL, check out both YouTube channels to see YouTube Shorts, individual segment videos, and all the other live shows fully on both of those YouTube channels. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions, more reactions to all the storylines around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me, and I hope to see you guys back here to close out the week on tomorrow's show.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that